Okay, today we're going to learn another way to factor, and this is for problems that are quadratic trinomials, so things that have three terms and the highest exponent is an x squared, but where the number in front of the x squared is not 1. Okay, and this is page 13 in your notes right now. So before we did problems where you had a quadratic trinomial, but the number in front of x squared was 1, so we just set up our two parentheses. When the number in front is not just 1, we have to do something different here. So there's going to be a couple of steps you're going to go through. So I'm going to go through the steps with you, okay, and then we're going to practice doing a couple of them. So first of all, check that you have your quadratic trinomial in standard form. Okay, step 1, you're going to take the numbers in front of the x squared and the constant and multiply them. So that would be the 2 and the 4. So 2 times 4 is going to give me 8. Okay. The next step is you need to find the two numbers that multiply to 8, but it needs to add to this middle number in the original problem. And there are only two numbers that are going to work. So the two numbers that multiply to 8 but add to 9 are going to be 8, positive 8, and positive 1. Then now you're going to rewrite the original problem using those two numbers, replacing that 9. This is called splitting the middle. You're going to split that 9 into 8 and 1. So I'm going to rewrite the original problem, and instead of writing 9x, I'm going to split it up into 8x plus 1x, and that 4 is still there. Then the rest of it is going to be factor by grouping, which we've done before. So let's take 2 at a time. I'm going to pull out 2x. I'm left with an x plus 4. Bring down the sign. Look at the next two. I don't see any GCF, so I'm just going to write a 1. I'm left with an x plus 4. Notice these two are the same. So your next step is to write it as 2 parentheses. This comes out. The 2x plus 1 is left over. The last step, if you want to, you can multiply it out and you should get back to the same problem. Okay, let's try a couple more. So let's look at the first one down here. So step 1, you're going to take the first number, the number in front of x squared, and the coefficient and the constant, which is the number by itself, and multiply them. It is negative 12. You need to break that number apart and find two numbers that multiply to negative 12 but add up to negative 11. There are only two numbers that work. Those numbers are going to be negative 12 and positive 1. Multiplies to negative 12, adds to negative 11. Now I'm going to replace the negative 11 and rewrite the problem using these two numbers. So instead of negative 11x, I'm going to write negative 12x plus 1x. Everything else stays the same. And it doesn't matter which order you have these numbers. Once you get to this point, then you're going to go ahead and take 2 at a time and do factor by grouping. What's the GCF in the first two? 3x times x minus 4. Bring down the sign, plus. I don't see anything in common, so there's a 1. I'm left with x minus 4. I see the x minus 4s are the same, so your final answer should always be 2 parentheses. X minus 4, and then you have this 3x plus 1. Okay. What I would do is pause the video, try the second one your own, and then listen to it again for the explanation. First step, 12 times negative 6 is negative 72. Two numbers that multiply to negative 72, but add up to the number in front of this x, which is negative 1, is negative 9 and 8. Rewrite the problem using those two numbers. Just replace the middle one with those two. Everything else stays the same. Then factor by grouping. In the first two, what do I see? I see a 3 and an x. I'm left with a 4x minus 3. Bring down the sign. I notice there's a 2. I'm also left with the 4x minus 3. These should always be the same. So my final answer is 4x minus 3 times 3x plus 2. Okay, again, pause the video, try number 3 on your own, and then start the video to listen to my explanation. Here's number 3. 6 times negative 5 is negative 30. Two numbers that multiply to negative 30 but add to the number in front of the x, which is negative 1, is going to be negative 6 and 5. Rewrite the problem using these two numbers that I just found. Everything else stays the same. And then we're going to factor by grouping. Take two at a time. I have a 6x and an x minus 1. Bring down the sign. Look at the next two and find your GCF. I see a 5. You're also left with an x minus 1. These should always be the same, right? So that goes in your first parentheses, and then whatever you have left over is going to be your second parentheses, and this is your answer. Okay, and here's the last one. Same thing, pause the video, try it on your own. Okay, step 1, 6 times 3 is 18. What are the two numbers that multiply to 18 but add up to positive 11? The only two numbers are 9 and 2. Rewrite the problem using those two numbers. And then we take two at a time. So GCF between 6x squared and 9x is 3x. You're going to be left with the 2x plus 3. Bring down the sign, plus. There's nothing between these two that's a GCF except 1, so I'm going to write the 1. And you have 2x plus 3 still left. These two should be exactly the same. So I have 2x plus 3 times whatever's left over, 3x plus 1. Okay, watch the video if you need to and pause it along the way, and then you're going to try a couple problems on your own.